Men and women of Reddit who caught their significant others cheating. How did you do that? And what was your reaction? My ex-husband and his family smoked a lot of pot. Still do. His sister, kids, and nanny were visiting from out of state for a few weeks. When it was time to fly home, they left their stash at my ex-Mill's house because they didn't want to take it on the plane. My ex asked if I would pick it up because I was nearby. Stupidly I agree. I don't smoke, and I was willing to carry it in my car for him. To my surprise, I found a note from the nanny to my ex saying she was in love with him and she was so happy for the time they had together. Obviously she thought he would get the weed instead of me. While it was incredibly painful at the time, I am definitely living my best life 15 years later. Worst one I know of is an acquaintance of mine. Came home from work one day and found his missus having sex with his dad. That blew up all over Facebook and became a local drama fest where people tried to organize a shunning of the dad and missus. I remember it well because, well, I know people cheat, but with your partner's father? Come on. I was in the Navy and was out on deployment for 6 months after just recently getting engaged. It's one of those stupid things that young military guys do. One day I get a letter from my fiance's best friend telling me that she caught my fiance and her BF together. This was years before email and smartphones were common. We write back and forth several times and eventually it comes out how she caught them. How my fiance begged her not to tell me, and that the fiance didn't know that we were corresponding. I eventually get back to the States and plan to play it off as though I didn't know, but too many of my friends intercepted me with the news that it wasn't just the one guy, but several, and let me know that she knew that I was aware. Eventually we met, and the confrontation was minimal and tame. We broke off the engagement without a lot of drama. She kept the ring. The best friend and I ended up hooking up. At first a sort of revenge duck kinda thing, but turned serious. We celebrate our 32nd wedding anniversary this year. Edit. Maths. This year will be 31. After 20. It's all a blur. I had some really good friends in the next town over where my girlfriend lived, and they figured it out for me. They were super gentle about it and patient with me through my denial. We were together for 5 years, living together for around 4. I came home from work early. When I got out of my car I saw her peek through the blinds to see who was outside. I walked in the door to her coworker on the couch, obviously uncomfortable and clothes messy, and her locked in the bathroom. I wanted to pummel the shit out of him then and there, but he was a trained MMA fighter, and I Walder left the house that night with more than a broken heart. Went to a friend's house for a while. They started dating the next day. Shit sucks. It took a while for me to get trust back in relationships. Edit. Her coworker had been to many gatherings, and now I wouldn't beat a woman's ass even though, yes, she was more deserving. Thank you all for the comments. It was 10+ years ago, and I'm doing good. Went for my yearly checkup and tested positive for chlamydia. Turns out my ex was sleeping around. Edit. Apparently false positives are common with these types of tests, so have your so tested as well. I hope you're in a relationship where you can openly talk about such things. My ex was a big drinker and I wasn't. She would frequent this bar close to our place pretty often with friends. I rarely went because I just wasn't a fan of bars or her drinking friends. One night she went out with a couple that I didn't mind that much. I was bored at home, so I decided to head over for a little bit. As I walk in I see my ex sitting at the bar with the couple. The bar was packed, and as soon as I made eye contact my ex, she had this strange look on her face. She turns to this guy sitting next to her, and he immediately gets up and leaves. I felt something strange right away, but I brushed it off as me being irrational. I stayed for like an hour and headed home. I couldn't shake the feeling I had though, so I checked one of her friend's Facebook page to see if there was any connection that existed between my ex and this random dude. Sure enough, he was friends with one of my ex's friends. I knew his name now, and that I wasn't as crazy as I thought. I sat on the information though. The next weekend she goes out drinking again and still had not returned home at 4 AM. I tried contacting her multiple times, and I got no response. I woke up to her coming home at 7 AM. and jumping in the shower immediately. I decided to check her phone while she was in the shower, and she kept all of the messages with this same guy. Some pretty telling information in the text thread. While she was still showering, I grabbed a fresh pair of clothes and headed to my best friend's house. 20 minutes later I get a phone call with her going apeshit about me leaving and not saying anything. I laughed at the projection. Told her that if she wasn't moved out by Monday the police would be there to force her out. She wasn't on the lease and her parents lived 10 minutes away from me. That was that. We were engaged, and it was about 4 months to the wedding. It was her birthday, and a Friday. We had both wanted to see Blue Man Group for a while, so I had ordered tickets to for us. Being a Friday, I took off half a day to surprise her. There was an unknown car in the drive, and the garage was open, which was extremely unusual. It also happened to bypass the camera we had facing the front door. I go in through the garage to hear the unmistakable sounds of sex in our bedroom. I had no clue who the guy was, but he was balls deep in her ass. She had the nerve to say that anal doesn't count. I ended our relationship then and there, which her family claimed broke her. The last time I looked her up a couple years ago, she had had 2 kids with 2 different guys and had spent time in prison for meth. It was a small town, so no surprises there. Her family still make me out to be the bad guy in the relationship when I ended it because I didn't forgive her. Worst of all, I never did get to see Blue Man Group in person. It wasn't a big damn breaking moment. It was a lot of little things, like how she'd cancel plans at the last second, or the random phone calls from unknown numbers she'd get. This was back before spam calls were an epidemic. Or how her phone was mysteriously off one night when I needed to get a hold of her. I had my suspicions, and then finally it clicked into place when I did some Instagram snooping and found a guy who followed her who posted a selfie wearing a very unique jacket that belonged to her. I confronted her the next day. She denied it. Tears, begging, all of that. I dumped her and walked away. The next day I messaged that guy on Instagram and he confirmed everything. Had no idea I existed. He dumped her too. Last I heard she's in EMT in Utah, Wyoming. Hope she figured out how not to be a garbage person. 4 years ago I was dating a girl who became distant and disinterested in a lot of things we both enjoyed together. Despite attempts to talk about it, she only grew more distant, then became less available to hang out and suddenly was working late a lot. I started getting suspicious about cheating when she was on her phone non-stop. Again I tried to talk about it, but she wouldn't engage. She also just didn't want to break up with me for whatever reason. I was actually going to end it on my own. But one weekend, when she was seemingly unavailable, some mutual friends told me they spotted her with a dude from her work and they were all over each other. Coincidentally, she had also lent me her iPad and it was synced to her phone, so I saw lots of texts between those two over that weekend. They were talking about running away together, etc. He was married and her supervisor. Mutual friends were also composed of her coworkers and reported them to ours. They were both forced to do training on not sleeping with coworkers. They were both denied promotion. His wife left him and she moved overseas. Sucked at the time. I was devastated, but karma got them good. My ex-husband was an early adopter of sending dick pics. I got his phone to get the numbers of his friends to invite them to a surprise birthday party while he was sleeping off a hangover, and there they were in his outbox. This was more than 12 years ago, when camera phones were barely functional. The husband of one of the women he was cheating on me with called me at work. At first I didn't believe him and hung up. How could the man I spent the past 8 years with, had 2 beautiful babies with, suffered together the loss of one of those children do something so hurtful? Still a part of me had doubt. He had affairs and other relationships, and we had a rocky patch early in the beginning where I suspected an affair, but didn't have proof. I told my boss I felt sick and had to leave early, and I called this guy back and found out that my ex and his wife along with one of their friends were all sleeping together for about a year. He had confronted my ex and told him that he was going to tell me, but my ex convinced him to wait a month since my mother had just died. I took my time coming home and confronted him and told him to pack and leave. since I've pieced together a lot of what happened and all the lies he told me where, if I was in a different headspace I might have caught onto the affairs earlier. I also found videos hidden on one of our computers and found out he was having booty calls in our apartment while I was at work and he was watching our daughter. At that point it put the headstone on any possibility of reconciliation. I owned a house with my fiancé. I woke up in the middle of the night and he wasn't in bed. I went searching. His truck and another vehicle were in the driveway. Then, I went upstairs and found the guest bedroom was locked. After barging my way in, I found him with another woman in bed. That bed happened to be my childhood bed. He forced me out of the room, literally grabbed me by the neck and pushed me out and closed the door back. I knew I couldn't do anything at that point, so I called his parents who lived a few blocks away. His dad showed up and another fight broke out. I ended up leaving and staying at his parents until dawn. I moved out that weekend and let the house foreclose. 9 years later, it's finally off my credit report. I'm happily married to an amazing man and we own a beautiful home together. Edit due to pronoun issues TLDR. My ex-husband was sleeping with his best friend's wife while I was 8 months pregnant. It had been going on for a while. I was 8 months pregnant with our second child at the time and he wanted to go visit his brother for the weekend. I asked my doctor if it was safe for me to travel and she said it would be fine. I told my husband I could go, but he said he was really hoping to just have some time with his brother. I understood because a new baby really makes it hard to spend quality time, but I asked if he could take our older son, 3 at the time, so he could see his grandma and cousins. He said they were planning on drinking and whatnot and wasn't sure it would be a good idea. Dear country boys, so think shooting, drinking and whatnot. I agreed and he left for the weekend. After he left I get a call from his best friend telling me that he'll be in town for the weekend and he wanted to meet up. Not weird he called me because my husband was terrible at answering his phone. I told him unfortunately my husband was visiting back home. Bad timing. His best friend then said okay, I'm going to call you back, and hung up very abruptly. Turns out my husband and his wife had been caught by him a few months previously and he gave them a chance to make it right. I don't know why. He didn't tell me, but threatened to if they didn't stop. Well, they didn't stop and he told me. I think the worst part was that my husband's family knew and never once thought to tell me. These people were my family for 5 years and nothing. It's been almost 10 years now and I'm so much happier, but it was definitely an eye-opening experience. I found a used condom on the bathroom floor. I just emailed him a 30-day end of tenancy notice. I own the house. Close bracket. June 1st, 2018. Normal day. A Friday. My husband had kissed me goodbye and gone to work. I was cleaning the house for company who was coming to stay the weekend. The doorbell rang. There was a man at my door who introduced himself as the husband of a woman who my husband worked with. He was there to tell me that my husband and his wife were having an affair. He had busted them about 6 months prior and had told his wife that she had to end the affair. He thinks that she did end it for about 3 months, but then they started up again. When he found out they were at it again, he called my husband because he knew if he confronted him in person, he'd be in a jail cell for what he'd have done. On the phone, he told my husband to leave his wife alone or else he would come and tell me everything that was happening. Apparently, my husband thought that he was bluffing, so I was literally the last to know. My husband never came home again. He got an ad and banned a lawyer. The divorce was December 21st, 2018. We had been together for 24 years. Still hurts. Very unhealthy relationship. He was emotionally very abusive, and I was in a terrible place with my mental health. I found out at the ultrasound to determine the gender of our child. He was late, and I was noodling on Facebook waiting to be called. He was tagged in some photos in my newsfeed from a gig he'd been at on the previous weekend. Random lass was in all the photos of him, and they were all over each other. Also they were making out in the background of one photo. He turned up after I was called in. While the technician was printing the images I told him I knew He went off and on about how I was making it up. He'd never do that. Obviously I was lying to compensate for cheating on him and so on. When I pointed out there were photos, he stormed out and left me there. My dad had turned up during the appointment, anticipating that he'd react badly if we were having a girl, which he did, that was scattered through the cheating denials, and took me home. I considered us broken up at that point and stopped all contact, except texts related to the pregnancy. Mostly I was relieved. I had concrete evidence that it wasn't in my head, and I finally managed to escape that relationship. Ex-wife actually asked me for her blessing to commit adultery with another married man. She was shocked when I said I don't support it. She went ballistic, has severe mental health issues, went and did it anyway, and ended up in a psych ward. 2 marriages ended, and now the 2 cheaters are engaged. Little devastated at first. Blessing in disguise. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.